Good to go.
Good morning. Thank you. I'd like to start off by thanking my committee, especially Dr. Johnson attending from the conference and Professor Johnstone flying across the world to be here as I defend my dissertation. And thank you, Kristen, for being here too. And especially to Dr. Allen, who served as my major professor and spent an enormous amount of time, early morning, late nights, supporting this process. And I know that it's made the dissertation better because of all of your support, so thank you. So my dissertation was looked at paralegal students and paralegal instructors' perceptions of synchronous and asynchronous online paralegal course effectiveness, a mouthful, but a comparative study. And can you click on the slide? Thank you, that's good. And I want to give a sort of a roadmap of the presentation this morning. And I like to look at things from sort of this who, what, when, where, how perspective, but I'm going to start with the why, and then move into the how, the when, and the who, and then give you the what it means side of it. In this study, particularly, the research problem was timely for now for a number of reasons. I'm a paralegal. I've been a paralegal for 28 years, and as I learned in my master's program, there is little scholarly work in the area of paralegal profession generally and paralegal education specifically. Even though this profession dates back, it's still young, but it still dates back to formalized in the late 1960s, and there are close to 300,000 paralegals in the United States. So despite all of that, there's still little empirical research in the field. The American Bar Association, while it accredits law schools, it approves on a voluntary basis paralegal programs, and its guidelines require that any approved program must have 10 hours of legal specialty credit in the face-to-face traditional setting. So if you offer a fully online paralegal program, you can't be ABA approved. Then we've had this growth of the online environment, and in particular the use of synchronous online technology. And with the rapid growth of technology, we're not able to keep up with researchers into that field specifically. Yet, 90% of institutions find the online platform to be part of their long-term strategy, and the research shows that we have now enrollment of online which surpasses the enrollment of face-to-face. So that's another piece. And then finally, when we look at learning effectiveness, we've looked at discretely student outcomes, student satisfaction, but we haven't looked at student perceptions and instructor perceptions together. So this study combines all of those things, and it's the synergy of experiences and situation within the literature that has caused me to do this study. Supporting this dissertation was the constructivist theory, which was developed by Dewey, Piaget, and Vygotsky. It has been used and supports the framework for online synchronous learning, and it basically presumes that the learner constructs knowledge. And then it's also supported within the community of inquiry framework, which looks at a collaborative community approach, constructivist approach, and it takes both the instructor and the student together and deems those online courses to be successful when they have three elements involved: cognitive presence, teaching presence, and social presence. So the purpose of the study was to measure perceptions of paralegal students and paralegal instructors of the effectiveness of online synchronous and asynchronous paralegal courses. The dependent variable was course effectiveness measured by 11 subscales, and then the independent variable was student demographic and paralegal instructor demographics, certain of them, gender, age, here is the list. And it's anticipated that the findings from this study will inform paralegal instructors and instructional designers how to more effectively develop, evaluate, and design their online paralegal courses. So there were 8 research questions, and I'm going to try to drill this down and make it more simplistic than just reading on the screen to you. So the first 4 looked at differences, and specifically looking at the differences between paralegal students and paralegal instructors' perceptions of online courses, and then looked at students' perceptions of the differences of the effectiveness of synchronous to asynchronous, and same for instructors. And then I looked at relationships. were there statistically significant relationships between students' perceptions of synchronous online course effectiveness and their demographics, and then asynchronous, and then instructors' perceptions of synchronous effective course online compared to their demographics, and then asynchronous. So within the literature review, I pulled out some key pieces of literature that I'm going to integrate into the findings of this study. Colorado and Everly in 2010 found that age was not statistically significant as it affects academic performance in online courses. I replicated a dissertation done by Dr. Tung, which he did in 2007, which studied community college students in the online classroom. He also found that no statistically significant relationship between students' gender and course effectiveness, same with age. He did, though, find that instructors had higher perceptions than students of instructional design and content. And then Yang and Cornelius in 2004, they looked at positive perceptions of the quality of online courses and effectiveness related to flexibility, and then found a negative perception of instructors' lack of technical skills and uninteresting instructional methods, as well as poorly designed course content. So that's from the student perceptions, and then from the instructor. Can you hit it again? Sorry. Cherry and Flora did a study last year of radiology faculty and found a relationship between the number of courses taught in the online setting and their perceptions of effectiveness of that online courses. And similarly, faculty perceptions had no statistically significant relationship with their age. And then Sok, Kinzel, DaCosta, and Tung in 2010, which basically took a lot of what Dr. Tung did in his dissertation and actually published it in an article, found similarly they had positive perceptions of flexibility in a number of these subscales. So the who of this study. This study examined a largely unexplored population of paralegal students, paralegal instructors, who had either previously or were currently teaching or had previously taken or online paralegal courses. I used two instruments, exact instruments, for the survey design. They were validated within the Tung study. They had two sections, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 was course effectiveness, and it dealt with those 11 subscales, and there were 99 questions for those. They used a 5-point Likert scale from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree at 5. And then we collected personal data, so we could collect for the independent variables of various demographic information. So when I did instrument analysis to look at Cronbach's alpha, the literature holds that 0.7 or above means that the scales were reliable, and as you'll see here, had at least 0.7. On the student side, it was not less than 0.8. So had a reliable instrument. Data collection happened in 2 phases. So I started with sending an invitation for two participants, an invitation to participate, to the American Association for Paralegal Educators. I'm a member. We have a private listserv. And then there's also a closed LinkedIn group and a Facebook group. And then I sent over 100 individual emails to paralegal program instructors, directors and instructors. And then phase 2, still sending to instructors, but asking them to post the link to the student survey in their online classrooms. I used the UNT Qualtrics software, and participants were incentivized to participate. 10 students and 10 instructors received $15 gift cards, either Google Play or iTunes or Amazon gift cards for the instructors. And then I did send reminders after the initial posting and then prior to the close of the survey. So this is the sample and the demographics of the sample. There were 89 students who responded and 67 instructors, and you'll see that they were very similar in the makeup. So our profession, according to the Department of Labor Statistics, are 83% women in the paralegal profession, and this generally matched that. 78% of students were female. 92% were English speakers, 100% of the instructors were native English speakers. And then they had to evaluate their own technology skills on a level from intermediate to beginner, and you'll see they were closely aligned there. We had 1% beginner for students, but only within the 2 categories for instructor. And notably, generational cohorts. So I want to point this out because I'm going to sort of put a pin in this and talk about this in the survey results. But you'll see 6% of students were boomers, 15% were Gen X, 58% were millennials, and 22% were Gen Z. Compared that to the instructors, where 56% were baby boomers, 38% were Gen Xers, while 6% were millennials and no Gen Zers. And if you'll look just specifically at boomers and millennials, that's exactly inverse. Almost exactly inverse there. So this research design was attempted to draw conclusions about two discrete populations, and I used two different methods of statistical analyses. For differences, to determine statistically significant differences, I used an independent samples t-test, and then to look at the strength of relationships, I used correlational analysis, and then of course descriptive statistics. So let's talk about what I found and what it means. The results indicated that overall, paralegal students and paralegal instructors positively perceived synchronous and asynchronous online paralegal courses. And you can see just from their mean scores that none fell below even 3.75. So we have 3.86 on the student side, but nothing fell below that 3.95 on the paralegal instructor side. So if we think back to the Likert scale of 1 being strongly disagree to 5 being strongly agree, positively perceived. So overall, looking at the 8 research questions, 2 questions found no statistically significant differences, while there were, of the other 6, there were. But I'm going to focus in on that here in just a moment. So taking the research questions that deal with the differences, remember that there were 11 subscales looking at course effectiveness. A number of them were found to be not statistically significant differences between what we were looking at here. The ones that were found to be statistically significant were also practically significant with at least a median effect size. But notably in research question 1, paralegal instructors reported higher perceptions of online course instructional design than paralegal students in a synchronous platform. For research question 2, instructors reported higher perceptions of effectiveness of technical assistance, communication, and course content in asynchronous than the paralegal students did, but paralegal students reported higher perceptions of universal design. So I'm going to look at this a different way. Students showed less perceptions of technical assistance, communication, and course content, and I'm going to talk about that when we get to practical application. But importantly to me was research question 3. Our students do not perceive any differences in course effectiveness between asynchronous and synchronous courses. For paralegal instructors, they found higher perceptions of synchronous within the areas, subscales of universal design, online instructional design, and course content. This supports the findings of Tung as it relates to gender and instructor, higher instructor perceptions of instructional design and content. It also supports Yang and Cornelius with looking at flexibility and teacher technical support and uninteresting or tedious task, and further supports Cherry and Flora, who found a positive relationship as well with these. And then looking at relationships here, research questions 5 through 8, there were statistically significant relationships within each of these, and each of them, other than research question 6 that found no statistically significant relationship, there was a strong negative relationship between paralegal students' age and their perceptions of effective synchronous paralegal courses in user interface, navigation, universal design, and online instructional design. But there were no statistically significant differences of their perceptions in the asynchronous. There were strong negative relationship between paralegal instructors' age and their perceptions of effective course content in the synchronous platform, a positive relationship between their education level and the course content, and a positive relationship between the number of synchronous courses that they taught and their perceptions of effectiveness related to user interface, technical assistance, course management from the student, and instructional design. And then finally with research question 8, there was a negative relationship between instructors' age and their perceptions of effective asynchronous online getting started, and a positive relationship between their technology skills and synchronous universal design. Unfortunately, it was practically insignificant because we only had 9% and 7% respectively. So while we found statistical significance, not practically significant there. And this further supports Tung, Yang, Cherry, Flora, and Sok. But when we look at this one on age and students' age and synchronous online course design, as they get younger, the less they perceive effective course. What does that mean? So it means that we have boomers and millennials converse to one another. So we have boomers teaching, instructing, designing our classes, and we have millennials mostly taking our classes. So the millennials perceive that to be less effective than the boomer students do. So we have that inverse relationship. So as with any study, there are, of course, limitations to that. For this one in particular, generalizability was affected by the response rates. We did reach the threshold of the number of respondents so that we could have statistically significant results, therefore avoiding a type 1 and type 2 errors. However, it still was a small sample size, and for that reason it cannot be generalized. The results can't be generalized to the broader paralegal profession instructor in the online classroom setting. This used a self-reporting questionnaire, so you could have response biases. And then there could have been a variation between each participant's definition of the Likert scale. So what I perceive to be agree, you could perceive to be strongly agree. So we could have some differences there. And there was a lack of granularity within those scales, and I'm going to talk more about that when I get to future research. So practical application. The nice thing is, if you can, think of it this way, there isn't much literature in the field of paralegal studies and paralegal education, which means that it is ripe for investigation. So I would argue that there are a number of practical applications that can be taken from the results, which is if students do not perceive any differences between synchronous and asynchronous course effectiveness, and if instructors perceive synchronous to be higher effectiveness than asynchronous, then there is no reason why we can't have synchronous stand in as a valid alternative to traditional face-to-face courses. So for this study supports allowing synchronous to serve in that alternative rather than requiring on-ground face-to-face. Paralegal instructors should be provided professional development training in order to bolster their ability to design their courses so that looking at the perceptions revealed in the study from their students so that it improves their course effectiveness related to the subskills. And our online classrooms mimic our remote teams in the law firm, in the corporation, and other employers of paralegal students and paralegals. And therefore, we should integrate innovation and technology into our online classes and our assignments so that we better enable our students to go be good employees in the workforce. And this study the results revealed that students desire more effective communication. The suggestion here is to have timely and constructive feedback and grading, but also potentially incorporating synchronous communication within the asynchronous classroom, which could be holding office hours through a GoToMeeting, or live blogging one night a week to answer questions from students that they may have about student content.
Is that comment from your research findings, from the literature? Where does that come from? So timely and constructive feedback, incorporating.
So they had lower perceptions of communication, effective communication, and this was my suggestion as to how to meet that. So results of the study. Also looking at course content and the effectiveness of course content, it should include substantive, meaningful, and timely course content. And I want to specifically talk about the fact that using the PowerPoint from the publisher is not substantive, timely, or meaningful content in any source. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's this strong negative relationship between students' age and their perceptions of synchronous online classes related specifically to course design, universal design, navigation, and user interface. And I think what that means is, as instructors, we saw there were mostly baby boomers and Gen Xers, and they're evaluating and their perception of course effectiveness and finding it to be higher than the perceptions of the millennial and Gen Z students. So we have to find ways as paralegal instructors to incorporate technology and use that technology in meaningful ways in order to engage those paralegal students so that they feel like it is more effective to them. So future research, again, because this area is ripe for further investigation, this study focused specifically on course effectiveness and the evaluation of their perceptions only of course effectiveness. It did not look at, for example, student satisfaction or success or learning outcomes. Yet I still think that that needs to be explored. So explore the broader topics of assessing student satisfaction and success in the synchronous and asynchronous online environments and its intersection with their demographic characteristics. Also, examine the role that technology and instructor innovation play in the online setting, especially through the lens of student success, satisfaction, and performance. And then look at the effects that students' critical thinking skills and knowledge construction and time management and their expectations have on course effectiveness and efficiency as they relate to the quality and the effectiveness of online study. And then again, we did not investigate performance here, and I think it's worthy of investigation to look at student performance across a variety of online and face-to-face courses. And I don't just mean by their ultimate grade in the class, but looking at their assignments and maybe doing a comparative study of in the synchronous classroom, the asynchronous classroom, and the face-to-face. Same semester, same assignment, and how did they do looking at and comparing those. And then examine the differences in learning outcomes related to their generational cohorts, and in particular as it relates to the generational cohorts of their paralegal instructors, and really investigate what these differences in ages mean. And then, of course, this study was limited to paralegal programs in the United States, but I believe that it's worthy of investigation to do a comparative study to the offerings of other countries of common law, for example, the ILEX program within England and Wales, including looking at their online course effectiveness, student and instructor satisfaction, student success, and student learning. And then also, we can always do better with research design. This study had a small sample size, and I think part of that contributed to the lack of the volume or number of synchronous programs out there, but it's in its infancy. So as we have more synchronous offerings, we will therefore have more instructors teaching in the synchronous platform and therefore a larger sample size. But it is important that we investigate this so that we have a larger sample size to be able to generalize to the greater population. And then conduct a similar study in a qualitative fashion. This was obviously a quantitative review, but when you do qualitative methods, you actually get you're able to talk and get some deeper, richer information from paralegal students and instructors about what it means to have an effective online course. And again, this study happened in a moment in time rather than I think a longitudinal study could be worthy of investigation. For example, looking at students' perceptions of effectiveness of courses of their first online course and their last online course, and then after they graduated, and then after they've gone to work as a paralegal, to see if over time their perceptions of that course effectiveness changed. And then instrumentation, as I mentioned earlier, that lack of granularity in the subskills. Can we change those up so that we have maybe the ability to reach a different sort of statistical analysis result? And then finally, I saw on Twitter on Saturday when I was taking a mental break, a nurse PhD student that I follow, it was a meme that said, a good dissertation is a done dissertation, a great dissertation is a published dissertation, and a perfect dissertation doesn't exist. So striving for perfection would be an effort in futility, but I am striving for greatness. So I'm looking to publish the dissertation in one of the 4 journals, and I listed the Journal of the Internet and Higher Education because I used a number of studies in this dissertation that was published in that journal. And paralegal studies and paralegal generally fall into career and tech ed, so potentially look in the Journal of Career and Technical Education. And then there were 2 open source publications that I also cited too, the American Journal of Distance Ed and the Academy of Educational Leadership Journal, that may be viable options as well. And with that, I welcome questions.
Yes. For those online, I'm just going to switch us back over and try to get this working correctly so that you're seeing a web view. Questions, comments?
Yeah, Christine, yes, you mentioned that better infusion of technology is necessary. But when you show the breakdown of the perception that instructors hold of their own technological skills, none were in the category of beginners.
That's right.
So how are you going to propose that that occurs with a group that believe they hold technology skills, but the students find it deficient?
So I'm going to actually set that into a different category. Their ability to use technology versus the actual use and incorporation of technology, I think, are two different things. So they could be proficient in the use of technology, but really not think about how to incorporate the use of technology in the myriad of ways that we can leverage technology in our classrooms. So for example, online peer review, incorporating YouTube videos into our classrooms, finding ways to collaborate together as we do in the law firm. I have law firm teams across the country. We find ways to collaborate either using Google Docs so that we can collaborate together to create documents. So it's one thing to have good technology skills, and it's another thing to actually incorporate the varying technologies that are available, especially when our millennials walk around with their screens in their face all the time. So how can we better, capture their use of technology within the classroom itself? I don't disagree that it will be a challenge to tell them that they need to do it, but I think the results of this study show that there is a disconnect there.
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Johnson, jump in if you want to.
Yeah, good job, Christine. I enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think I was reading an article recently, and just to add to what Christine just said, instructors are usually so fearful, or I should say maybe the baby boomers, of utilizing the technology that's available. And in addition to that, they oftentimes training isn't provided, so they don't know how to utilize the technology to match up with the skills of the younger generation. So I'm actually going back to the beginning of the study, Christine, and I think you might have mentioned this in your proposal presentation, but and pardon me if I missed this in the dissertation, but what are the reasons why for the paralegal programs, why is it that currently there's none offered fully online? Is it that there's resistance? I wasn't sure.
So there are programs that are offered fully online. For example, when I taught for the University of Arkansas Technical College, we were fully online. We were just not ABA approved. So the ABA approval process is voluntary. It's very expensive, and they have their specific guidelines that do not allow fully online programs to be ABA approved. They're really staunch in looking at that 10-hour of semester credit in the on-ground face-to-face. So there are programs out there that are fully online, but those things are mutually exclusive. So there are some that are incorporating that, but those that value, and there's lots of reasons to value that ABA approval, they're not able to offer them in a fully online setting. So their students are at least taking 10 hours of on-ground face-to-face courses. Did that answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Was that captured in the dissertation?
It is. It's in chapter
it
one.
might have been.
It's in chapter one, yes. That and on the first slide where I talk about, I think it's the second bullet point, that the ABA requires it. Thank you. One more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they do require it.
Okay, so it is required for the most part.
If you are an ABA approved program, then
Mm-hmm.
it's required that you have that 10 semester hour. But there's no requirement that you have to be ABA approved.
Okay.
That voluntary. Colleges are approved by SACS or their equivalent for accreditation, but they seek that because it gives them some added credibility to their program, that it's gone through that rigorous site visit and evaluation from the ABA.
All right, thanks much. So Dr. Allen, are we just kind of moving around to different chapters, or
wherever you'd like to move to?
Okay. So I like the internal consistency that you found for each variable. That's good. But I just have some very good dissertation. I think I have comments that are gonna require just maybe minor edits.
Okay.
But I didn't see the scores included for previous studies that were done. For example, so you included yours that you found for this study, But for tongue study, what was in
Oh,
the internal
yes.
consistency like? The Cronbach's alpha. It's good to include that, and for comparative purposes too. That's important.
And it's there on page 40 of the dissertation, Dr. Johnston.
Oh, did I miss that?
Well, there's a lot here,
might
so it's
have.
okay.
Yeah.
So page 40, about midway into that first paragraph.
Uh-huh.
And specifically the last sentence of that paragraph. So I go into talking about that he looked at it, but he found all of his subscales in his study were at the 0.7 or higher.
Okay, so I saw that. I saw that you kind of lumped everything together. I just figured it would be good to have them listed.
Out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For the audience online, I'm trying to get us back to being able to see the web camera.
And we can see that now, I think. Well, I can.
Are you seeing the screen or the web camera?
At both, yeah.
Oh, you're seeing both.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
And I did better than I thought. So while she's looking, on research question number 3,
Okay.
which was significant difference between student perceptions,
Yes.
and research question number 4,
Mhm.
difference in perception of instructors
Mhm.
between synchronous and asynchronous.
Right.
One was significant,
Right.
one was not significant.
Correct.
The instructor said there is a significant difference between the two.
But only if you look at, for chapter 4, only as it related to one of the subscales.
Okay.
Right.
So that's the piece that if research question number 3 says no significant difference, research question number 4 says there's some on the subscale. Which one should we believe? Research question number 3, research question number 4.
Well, one is students, the other is instructors.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm making a policy decision,
I see what you mean.
So if you're going to make a policy decision of going synchronous, asynchronous, online, not
right,
which should I do based on which are the questions? So how do you parse that out? So you're going to go back and you're going to say, we should go synchronous or asynchronous?
No, I'm not going to say that. So what I'm going to say is, I think you should offer them in the synchronous and the asynchronous, which is what a number of programs are doing. Instructors found synchronous, they have higher perceptions of synchronous than they do asynchronous, and students see no differences. So I think we have to look at why do instructors have higher perceptions? I can make a leap there because it's synchronous over asynchronous, and it more closely resembles the face-to-face on-ground format, right? But as far as looking at the institution, well, we have this from students and we have instructors. Who do we believe more, our instructors or our students?
And the answer is?
Yeah, I don't know, but I would probably believe my students.
Well, and that's the piece that you're starting to make policy decisions based on this. Where do you go?
Did you get a chance to weigh that for yourself in programs anywhere else outside of the US? I mean, you've mentioned, for example, ILEX. Did you get any sense of how it's delivered there and what the perceptions of it are?
No,
So
but I think we should.
Future research
yes,
piece,
but I think it should. Because ILEX has actually been an online program, I think, as a whole, in totality, than we've seen. So US in some ways is behind in that approach. So I do think it's worthy of comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Johnson, did you find other things that you'd like to talk about?
I'm kind of reading through my notes here that I have. And again, this is minor, but the link to the survey was available for 2 months.
Yes.
And within the 2 months, and I'm asking this because I was wondering while reading if you had some things written during the time of your proposal and then didn't change some of what I think probably needs to be changed while you were writing your dissertation. That happens. So within the 2 months, the invitation was sent and then 2 reminders. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then also within there, I sent out individual emails to program directors and and paralegal instructors that I knew, asking them to both take the survey and to share it with their colleagues and instructors within their programs. So there was work being done during the midst of those two things, but as far as sending out the invitations using the AFB listserv and Facebook and LinkedIn, that happened in those time frames. But then filling that with individual emails seeking participants, inviting them to participate.
Oh, okay. Well, that better explains it, because it seemed like there was like a large gaps in between, and perhaps if you had more reminders, then the response rate could have been higher. But I guess that explains. It wasn't that clear to me in chapter 3. And it's important for replication purposes,
Sure.
the same way that you were right. So
Right. Yes, I agree.
yeah.
Are you on a certain page or certain section, if you can guide me?
I believe page 41.
Yeah, within that first data collection in phase 1.
Somewhere about there.
Okay.
Because I actually have a separate paragraph about sending invitations individually, but can incorporate that in a different way.
And so why was it open for that long a period?
Because I wasn't getting the responses that I needed, and I was trying to reach that threshold to achieve statistical significance, and so then I just became sort of a beggar.
I figured,
Yeah.
but the thing is, I think it can be captured more clearly in how it's written.
Okay.
Yeah. And don't we all know what it's like to be begging, kind of wanting more? Just 10 more.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So let me go to another. So you made the statement that boomers design and millennials take. I guess that was it.
Generally speaking, we have boomers and Gen Xers taking too.
So is that a problem? Is it a problem that we could solve? Or should we just have millennials designing for millennials, get the boomers out of the design? Where do we go? So you have these two dichotomies here,
right,
which we can see for what you have. Why? Is there a solution or just an awareness?
Well, I think the results of this study lend themselves to a solution based on those perceptions. I don't think you just eliminate boomers and Gen Xers from designing their own courses just because of practical. I mean, I design my own. Like, I don't have instructional designers in some of my online classes. I think that there needs to be an awareness that that's happening. I remain unconvinced that they know that that's happening. For one thing, no one's ever done this study before. So if we take that awareness and then raise that up to how do we solve this problem, so I think it's a twofold yes and yes.
On page 86, you mentioned that there could be collaboration in teaching methods in which students learn from each other.
True.
Through the use of peer assessment, submission legal portfolios, etc.
Right.
Just building on the comment that you just made in relation to the instructors and their learning ability.
Right.
Do you see that there's an opportunity here to utilize the skills that the students have and those actually transfer back? Because here you're talking about students helping each other.
Yes.
But what about students helping instructors?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. But I think it's worthy of because if you think about, like, we know professors who are teaching in a way that includes discussion and that students teach each other in the classroom. They have that peer learning process. But there's something to be said, though, too, from just, I'm going to call it even reverse mentoring or reverse instructional design of can we use a student as a teaching assistant, for example, to help us design our courses so that it better meets the needs of those millennials and Gen Zers. certainly
Gen Zers.
Gen Zers. They're the Generation Z. They were born 1996 and after, and so basically they're 22 now. Yeah.
Because it seems that, in part, the very process that we're going through here, and this goes to the core of, I suppose, the question that interests me most about this process for the PhD.
Yes.
You know, why do we do this?
Right.
What is it about?
Right.
Is in reality, there's an opportunity during the doctoral process, isn't there, for the student who have taken master. And
Yes.
in real terms, they should be doing
They
that.
should,
Shouldn't
right? Yes, they should. Right.
So if we're doing that in this environment,
Why can't we do that in
Then
our online classrooms?
can we apply it
I think so.
down
That's a
there
good point.
rather than up here?
Absolutely. I hadn't thought of it, but that's, why not? It seems practical to me. I mean, it does seem practical that we learn from one another. I think there's always a learning opportunity when we teach, because I think just, we're all teachers in this room. When we've, taught a new course, we leave thinking, okay, well, students didn't do so well here. Can we incorporate and learn from their feedback to us to improve our courses? Wouldn't that be sort of analogous here to what you're suggesting, perhaps?
Other questions, comments?
I have just one more comment. But did anything hit out at you in relation to the non-native English speakers?
I really wanted it to,
Or you? Mm-hmm.
but
No.
there wasn't. I think
Okay.
I'm trying to use my memory now, but I think there were only 4 different ones, and so there wasn't even an analysis that could be done because they weren't.
Yeah.
It really wasn't. I would like to see that, and Tung was very specific in his that he looked at that to see whether there was any relationship or any differences with that
Mhm.
particular demographic. But in this case,
Right.
there just weren't enough to be able to analyze that.
And that could be a recommendation for future. Because I mean, when I read that in chapter 3, I was anxious to move on
Yes.
to the other chapters to find out
Okay.
if there were major differences.
Okay.
In fact, that could be your next study, Christine.
It could be.
Yeah. Because as online instructors, we don't factor that in.
We don't.
Most times, we're just
Really don't.
teaching.
And quite frankly, and why not? Is it just because it is the online platform and we don't
Mhm.
speak? I mean, in the synchronous you would, but not in the asynchronous. So it's a good comment.
Okay, so my last question.
Yes.
I know you're going to get this published, but what's next? What happens from here?
What happens from here? So, yes, I'm going to get this published, but this process, I learned a lot, specifically about paralegal, and I would like to continue. In fact, I was talking to Kristen earlier. No one's doing this, so I think I capitalize on the fact that no one is doing it and continue to do it. But also, I'm part-time lecturing, still a paralegal instructor, but then also hopefully doing part-time lecture work in the Department of Criminal Justice here at UNT is the hope. So sort of the next phase of both research and teaching pedagogy.
Okay, all right. Good job.
So I asked this of Tessa, and I'll ask the same of Kristen.
Yes.
Any questions you'd like to ask, since the committee has finished the questions? Tessa, are there any questions you'd like to ask? I'm opening this to everybody now.
That's fine. Oh, yes. So sample size, so it was 165. So I had, can you go to slide 14, please? I'm going to teach you type 14. There we go. So we had 89 students and 67 instructors.
So what was the different population of possibilities?
Oh gosh. Yeah, so in fact, can you go back to my population slide? There we go. So if we looked at anticipated a third of paralegal students, 3,200, taking synchronous or asynchronous, and then 570 instructors, yes.
So Chris and I were talking about this because I knew this slide
Yes.
and this number
Yes.
because, and it goes to what Tessa is talking about also. There's the population of
Yes.
3,200 and
Right.
9,600
Yes.
that went down to 67.
67 and 89 respectively.
Yeah.
So
I
Cry
needed
over it.
64.
Yeah.
I didn't cry over it, but I was concerned about it. But I really was trying to get to that 64 number for my G power,
Okay.
so that I could avoid type 1, type 2 statistical error. So 64 was the threshold. In fact, I was on campus and met with both Professor Johnstone and Dr. Allen, and at that point I had reached 64 in both groups and was infinitely relieved, but still sad that there's no way to,
No.
there are a number of ways I can increase the sample size, but I would have needed a whole lot of grant money
Right.
in order to be able to get on a plane and start getting into classrooms. It's the only way you do that, I think.
So with 3,200 students, why was it that the projected sample size was 64 per group when you had totally different numbers of X equal 3,200 and X equals 570?
Okay, so
What's the reasoning? How do you support that?
yeah, so on page 36 and 37 of the dissertation, we look at when we look at our sample sizes and look at what numbers we're trying to reach, we look at them from two different perspectives. We look at one for purposes of what we call our G power analysis or G power score to reach statistical significance, so that we can run our statistics and not worry about encountering type 1 or type 2, as I call the O.J. Simpson or the Shawshank prediction errors. So false positives, false negatives. Then we have just an overall ability to generalize to the greater population, which is Craigie and Morgan from 1973 developed sort of numbers that we look at, looking at the greater population and the number our sample size would need to be in order to generalize out to the greater population. So there are two distinct numbers that we look at when we're trying to determine our best sample size. If all things were wonderful, then I would have I would have gotten to that number as offered by Craigie and Morgan. It's just not practical in this instance. So at a minimum, I was trying to reach the 64 per group so that I could avoid those type 1, type 2 errors.
Right. Okay.
This was a big discussion as we
It was a big discussion.
as we started this.
Yes,
this is
for
one
sure.
of the big, major
Yes.
concerns as we took a big number and started pulling it down.
Right.
And I think this goes back to the question that you had earlier about why 2 months.
Yes.
And at 3 weeks we're going,
Oh my
no,
gosh. Yes.
and
then it became
extend it out and keep bothering.
And I will say this now too, is I'm not one to ask for help. I'm staunchly independent and I'm just not good about that. I can just fix it myself. But for me, this was a learning opportunity as well. And my emails were help, dissertation research. That's how and my first sentence was, I need your help.
Yeah.
At that point, I was desperate
Yes.
to get response to. So you start to rely on those relationships that you've developed in your field and really ask for help so that I could get to the numbers I needed.
Right. Okay.
Okay, with that being said, I've heard from both committee members so far, so I'm gonna make this quick and easy and say congratulations, Dr. Farmer.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Congratulations, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining, Tessa.
Yes, thank you. And Dr. Johnson for joining from the UK. I wish I was with you.
We wouldn't be
But I wouldn't be here.
Yes.
No, right. No, I wish I was with you now. Can I just transport myself to...
Sure.
So I have corrections. I have some little things, but there aren't any big things that I heard of. Karen, thank you so much for joining us from the UK. I think I have the comments written down on native speakers as a recommendation for future studies. We'll go back on chapter 3, page 41, 43, and talk about the survey link.
Right.
With the 2
Yeah,
months.
that needs to be clearly written.
Replicability. And then I just have a couple of little notes on practical applications and such as that. I don't have paperwork from technology or learning technologies on signing documentation. However, we're not in a big hurry. Christine's not going to graduate until the fall because of some things on getting some things done with UNT.
Okay.
To keep her as a student, she needs to be as a student in the fall.
So dumb. But
So
I still
I'm not in a hurry on it.
Summer, and I'm taking my 6 hours of dissertation credit in the fall.
But we'll get the document signed after you get back.
Oh, okay. Because that was gonna be my next question for you.
Yep. No problem.
Now I get it. Okay. All right. Well done, Christine.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Do you have a web camera?
Yeah. Do you have a webcam?
If you have a web camera, we would love to get you on
the
screen
to get a picture.
Oh my
We'll get a picture
goodness.
right.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to do that, we'll
No,
do
I
it.
can. I don't. Let me see. I guess I can just fix my hair and.
Yeah, take a minute picture here, and then we'll get pictures.
She's not at a conference at all, you know that.
No, that's why I said.
He's been raised well by his wife.
Yes.
Okay.
So no, you picture here.
Put on your lipstick. That's for me. It's always lipstick. Can have lipsticks on.
Well, I would love to see the end product of this.
Yes.
Oh, you'll see the end
absolutely.
product of
you
it.
definitely will, for sure. In fact, I have, although it's not the end product, I do have a bound version for you, Dr. Johnson, that I'll
Oh, awesome.
for you. But there will be.
And I was actually referring to the picture. But anyway,
Oh.
I'm looking forward to the the hard copy, the bound version.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, are we done now?
No, just
No,
a picture.
I want a picture of you.
Oh, okay. Do I smile?
No, I'm trying to. Let's see.
How can we see?
Can you share your web camera? You should.
Oh, isn't that what I'm doing?
Okay, let's see if I can find it.
I'm actually sharing. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I have to figure this out then.
Yeah, I am sharing, so I'm not sure what's happening.
You're okay. It's on my end.
Yeah, it's weird to see it from the side, right?
Yeah, it is.
In fact, from my end, my picture is just beside yours, and then the slide is towards the bottom of the screen. Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
I think that's what it is.
Because I can see both. I can see myself, I can see you, and can you see me now?
Can you see me now? Can you see me now?
I can see you.
We're trying.
Well, no, I can't see, but let me see if I can get you back. Yeah, now I'm there.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'll give it to the millennial.
I'm not I was going to say, I'm not a millennial. Oh my gosh. I'm staunchly with it.
I don't know why you're so against now. I'm just going to say it right now.
I'm totally not.
Here. Right?
Yeah, I think Kristen is gonna get it.
Yeah, she is.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know. One of them. There's got to be one of them.
My thought process was here, webcam, and then attendees. Do we just drop down? Connected to audio.
Make presenter.
Make her present.
Wow.
Okay, so do I?
Who's talking? Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yay!
Oh, no, I can't see me. Oh, no, I can see me.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's fine.
We can do that just fine.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Oh, look at that.
There
Yay! Perfect.
All right.
It's done, but you didn't tell me to smile. Oh my goodness!
No, we haven't
I
taken it yet.
can't believe you did that.
All right.
We'll
Where do you want me?
Get you right in here. We'll get all.
Are
we'll
we
get everybody
all
in here.
here? Can you see?
Okay.
We have her.
Got her. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Do one more.
Okay. There you go.
Yay! Thank you.
Kristen took the picture, so it'll turn out great.
Oh.
I could actually see her taking the picture.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I will.
Good.
Okay, now, oh, good.
Good.
Well, there's a bit of a glare there. I probably should have done. But anyways, that's
Hey, enjoy your
okay.
trip.
We'll get one at graduation
Yes,
with all of us. There you go.
exactly. I will be there.
Good.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
No worries.
I'm gonna walk in December.
December.
Yeah, we don't. Our program doesn't graduate.